American heavy metal band The Rods, formed in 1980 by David "Rock" Feinstein, Steven Starmer, and Carl Canedy. Join Mark Lewis and R.O.A. for an exclusive interview with The Rods' original drummer, Carl Canedy.
You found rockonamerica.live. We're bringing rock and roll to America and beyond. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.
In a world where heavy metal reigns supreme, one band rose from the ashes of the 70s to etch their name in the annals of rock history. That band is none other than The Rods, the American heavy metal trio that stormed the music scene in 1980. The brainchild of David "Rock" Feinstein, a virtuoso on the guitar and a powerhouse on the vocals, The Rods were a force to be reckoned with. Alongside Feinstein, Steven Starmer with his thumping bass and vocals, and Carl Canedy, the rhythmic backbone with his drumming and vocals, completed this iconic lineup. Join us as we delve into the heart of the band with an exclusive interview with Carl Canedy. Hear the stories from the man behind the drums as he shares the highs, the lows, and the raw, unfiltered journey of The Rods. From their formation to their rise to stardom, Carl Canedy's tale is one of passion, resilience, and the undeniable power of heavy metal. So, tune in and immerse yourself in the powerful narrative of The Rods, a band that didn't just play music, but defined an era.
Hi, this is Mark with Rock Over America magazine, and today I have the extreme pleasure of doing a follow-up on the story of The Rods. And if you're going, the who? I think way back to the 80s, when American metal was taken off, and you will remember The Rods. And it was David "Rock" Feinstein, and Garry, and you're going to have to help me with the last name, Bordonaro, and then Carl Canedy, who's with me, who you're hearing in the background. And they formed what became one of the very, very influential, very, very important hard rock heavy metal bands in the first wave of American heavy metal in the 80s that came on the tail end of the new wave of British heavy metal. Without further ado, Carl Canedy. How are you doing, Carl?
I'm doing great, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad you guys, when I found out from David that you guys, when I interviewed him last year and we were talking about Bitten by the Beast, and I found out you guys had an album, I got all excited. I'm like, you got to be kidding. Not in a bad way, but I mean, I'm thinking this is awesome because you guys hadn't had an album going back to the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. 86, 87, whatever. It's been a long time.
Yeah, about 86, right in there, yeah. And to find that out, and then to find out that at that time, if you remember last fall, November, somewhere in there, when I talked to David, the only song that was out there known that Ronnie James Dio had done his last song was Metal Will Never Die, which is on David's solo album. And then David told me, and I actually have this because all the wire services didn't have this at the time, that actually it was officially that you'd written the song The Code, which we'll talk about, for Ronnie. And you guys actually had that in the can, and that was going in the album where all the wire services were going, well, you know, we've heard this is supposed to happen, and it's tentatively supposed to be released, and they're looking at possibly May, and it seemed like nobody ever knew for sure, so I felt very, very fortunate and lucky that, hit it off with David. David also took a liking to me as well. David's a really, really good guy, but, I found that out about last fall, and I'm like, holy crap, there's actually two of them. And that song in particular has a very, very holy diver Latin line, heaven and hell deal feel to it.
You're talking about The Code?
The Code. We're talking about The Code. It has a very, very Latin line, holy diver, heaven and hell feel to it. I mean, it's like if Ronnie James Dio decides for whatever reason to guest star with the Rods and they kind of did a Dio thing. It'd be like if you guys did a Dio Rods thing and totally balanced it out and blended it together. That's the song, and I've played it for a couple people close to me. I'm like, holy cow! This is a Dio song. But I said, listen close. It's also a Rod song, and they go, you're right. It's like the perfect balance. You did a great job with this.
Thanks. Ronnie was amazing to work with, and he recorded the two songs when he came in and came to David's studio, and just amazing. I mean, for me, it was a career highlight to work with Ronnie, and just to watch him in the studio. I mean, he was everything David had always told me. Ronnie was a one-take guy, and Ronnie, and you just think, well, it's legendary, people's memories kind of gloss things over, but it was absolutely true. I mean, Ronnie was flawless, just amazing, and a really nice guy, like the nicest guy.
And I want to stop you there because I want to talk about this a little bit later in the interview.
Sure.
But I want to, and we'll leave everybody hanging there. They're going to go, doggone it, why did he cut this off? There's a reason. So I want to go back from the beginning. When you were growing up, what were you listening to? What were your musical influences? What did you really dig as a kid?
When I first started playing drums, I was, listening to this top 40 music. And then I was watching American Bandstand one Saturday, and I saw this long-haired group of freaks on stage, and they were blowing out the speaker, and it was Blue Cheer, and I went, okay, that's what I want. And went out and bought another bass drum, and that was the end of it. That was the end of it. I knew what I wanted to be, and I started just trashing my drums like Keith Moon, and just totally changed my life watching Blue Cheer on American Bandstand.
Were they doing Summertime Blues?
They were, and it was just like the speaker was rattling. You could tell it was definitely loud in the studio, and just like, okay, I get it.
You know what's interesting about that? I don't know if you've ever read this or looked at this, but you know what's really interesting about that song in particular? Their version of that song is considered the first heavy metal song before Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and, Hendrix was lumped in there and all that. That's considered the song.
Yeah, and I believe that. And it was just amazing to see. It was just, wow. And it was, for me, later to produce the The Beast Is Back album.
Yeah.
For those guys, it was great to work with them. Dickie and Paul. I mean, Paul was just, it was great to watch them. I mean, we're talking about guys who were just musical masters. These guys were just crazy good, and they never lost it. I mean, Paul was just such an innovator on drums. You see his mind work, how he created his parts, and Dickie was flawless playing bass, and just a great singer, so much feel. It was just great to work with them.
So is that the thing that influenced you to want to do this too? And was that the key moment where you said, that's what I want to do?
When I was like 5, my parents took me to a wedding, and I looked up at it was like at a VFW reception in some hall, some wedding reception thing, and I remember looking up at the drums, and it was like the movie with the white light shining down on the drum kit, and the Hallelujah, the choir singing Hallelujah, and it was just struck me like, whoa, that's what I want to do. The drums were just hypnotic to me, so I knew I wanted to be a drummer from that age, and it took me until I was about 13 to actually get a set of drums. But, that was my first, but once I started playing, I was playing top 40 music, and then once I saw Blue Cheer, that was it. It was like, everything after that just was heavy, and that was where I was, it was like my calling, the vision for me, so.
Yeah, a lot of people don't credit that when they go at basically the beginning of the heavy metal era and the first wave of British heavy metal, which is pretty at the tail end of it in '73. And you have Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and all that. Nobody really goes back to that one song that Blue Cheer did, which is Nettie Cochran cover. And then you have Steppenwolf coining the term heavy metal, and Born to Be Wild. And then you have the other one that nobody really credits for either, but I think in some ways has to be there with some of their work, is Iron Butterfly as well.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's a good point. That never hear people say that, but it's true. Iron Butterfly were very heavy. We did a show with Steppenwolf, and Steppenwolf and John Kay, they were great. I mean, this was in the early 80s, and they were still a great band. I'm sure they're still a great band.
But yeah, I like to mention that because that's kind of the key fundamental for for heavy metal. Just like if you go back to punk for a second, you have to go back really to the Stooges and the MC5. So, so anyway, so how did you end up and David end up meeting?
We had actually worked, like my band rehearsed at the same house that Elf rehearsed. So, I went back to when I was 19, I started playing in a band, and my bass player lived with the drummer and guitarist in Elf, Doug Thaler and Gary Driscoll. So Elf rehearsed in the house, we go see those guys. So, just have known them since I was 19.
Okay. And how did you and David decide to put the rods together? Because I know, if I remember, after Ronnie, there was a car crash, and that wound up in the hospital for a while, and then Ronnie ended up going off to Rainbow, and then David, if I have this correct, he just took some time off and then decided to put the rods together. So, from your viewpoint, from what you remember, what was that like, and how did that come to be?
Well, timeline, you're condensing that timeline a little bit. Elf actually was signed, and so the Elf band, Elf actually went on tour. They toured with Deep Purple for a year straight, and they were on the road. They were getting ready to make their second album. That's when David left, and that's when Elf continued on. And then out of that incarnation of Elf, that became Rainbow.
Right.
So that period of time, and that's when David kind of just got burned out from being on the road and went to the mountain. And he had some land and built a cabin and stayed there for a while. We had just known each other, so it was the case that actually we had worked with a bass player and this bass player, and Rock actually called me out and asked me if I wanted to play with some heavy musicians, and of course I was like, yeah, of course I'd love to play with you guys. So we tried that. It wasn't successful. It was successful musically, which is we never got to play any gigs. And then shortly after that, Rock called me and he said, let's start this band. And that's how the Rock started.
Did you realize you guys were going to be as influential? I mean, at all, did you? I mean, some band musicians would go, yeah, I knew I was going to be something and we were going to be special. I knew something was going to happen, and, I knew that we were going to have an impact or we were going to do really well and be successful. A lot of other musicians are like, I had no idea. We just wanted to go play. Did you guys, because two things. You guys got fairly successful. I mean, there's the Metallica that took several years to take off. That finally took off. But you had the Iron Maiden, and Judas Priest, and AC/DC at kind of the height of it with some other bands, but kind of everybody would be a little bit a step below that. But there were some bands that were very, very important, such as for like Glam, Poison was important. You guys were very, very important for the whole New York scene, and just influential overall. Where you guys perfectly blended hard rock and heavy metal together. Did you guys have any inkling that you guys are going to be able to do that, look back over time, and as important as you were? Because you guys really are important for what you guys did.
Well, Mark, those are really kind words. I appreciate it. I didn't, we didn't really think that. I mean, I knew David and I played well together. I knew that we clicked. It was apparent from early on when we started playing that, we had a chemistry. I didn't realize at the time, that I was really into progressive jazz, and so I was into playing heavy, but I also studied to become a NARD drummer, rudimental drummer, and I really into the fusion bands, and so I was bringing that element to the metal thing, which, has been pointed out that was one of the first times that kind of had been done, which I didn't realize that. I don't take any credit for that, nor do I, but it's been pointed out that was the case, but we had no idea. In fact, it was so bad for us when we started. We knew when we were writing these songs that we loved the songs, we loved playing them, and people started catching up, but a lot of people, we were clearing out clubs when we would play, and in the beginning, and I had one friend say to me, I walked out of the club at the end of the night after clearing it out, and he goes, Carl, what the hell are you doing? It's just, this is horrible. How can you play this? You're a great drummer. Why are you playing this crap? It's just horrible. And I was like, wow, this guy drunk outside of the club, and even he is giving me crap about playing this kind of music. But, I was like, yeah, I love doing this, so I'm going to continue on. And shortly after, we started building a following, and it started to catch on, and we started getting a following, and to the point where we started packing clubs, even though we were doing originals, which was unheard of, because it was, kind of at the end of the disco craze, and people were still looking to wear their bell bottoms and come out dancing. So
yeah, can I interject another point in here to try to paint the picture a little bit more? I'm 44. I was born in '66, And I grew up, and at that time when you guys were getting going, one of the biggest bands out there, at least in the Midwest, had we really understood, we wouldn't have said this, but we thought as a little kid, like 12, 13 years old, that a band called the Rockets, formed by Johnny B. Badoniak and Jim McCarty, who were together in Mitch Ryder and Detroit Wheels, as the Detroit Wheels, the Rolling Stones were the place opened up for them, had they come to town. When they came to town, we would have thought that the Stones had opened for the Rockets. And there's that very, very hard rock sound. The Rockets weren't quite metal, but we also had Ted Nugent coming out of there, and Bob Seger was on the verge of in 79, 80 taking off, and of course with disco about even Cal Cooper would say about killed everything. For rock it was a very, very ugly time, and then the semblances of new wave of British heavy metal comes out about 79, 80, starts coming over here. With bands like Maiden and Beggars Pantang and stuff like that. And then on the heels of that, about 82, there were little albums coming out that people weren't getting wind of until like 83, and this is all to paint the picture. You have Motley Crue and Dokken released albums in 82. They didn't start getting the airplay till like a year later. Def Leppard was performing since 80, but they were starting to get airplay about 82, 83. And then one of the first big things that takes off is Holy Diver by Ronnie James Dio when he was solo. By 82, that took off on the heels of Black Sabbath. But a lot of the stuff, it didn't seem like until Quiet Riot finally got it going in 83 that it started to open up the floodgates. And I say all that to say this, there were other bands out there as well. So if you look at some of the women in metal, such as Betsy from the group Bitch and Leather Leon, who went on to Chastain, and Dawn Crosby and Ann Boleyn and Debbie Gunn from Sentinel Beast, before Lita Ford was getting going and around the time, if they hadn't done what they did, you wouldn't have in this moment in bands like Kitty and that. It wouldn't have been there because it was a boys' game. You had the whole thrash thing going on both coasts. It's Anthrax over on the East Coast and Overkill, and then you had like Metallica and that coming out of the West, and Megadeth coming out of the West Coast. And in the middle of all that, you had places like Chicago and Detroit and different places, and Dallas, Texas that were brewing up things. But even in the beginning, there had to be people who did that, and that's where you guys come in. You have in different places, you had the Gods who came up, you had you guys, the Rods who came up, and there were other bands too that were coming up there and forming this foothold for what we now know as heavy metal or hard rock and heavy metal. And even Twisted Sister took a while to get going, but it was forming this musical palette and this and making this big musical, not just a painting, but like a whole art showcase that nobody knew was about to hit, and when it finally hit, it blew up overnight, seemingly. But you guys still were one of the bands that's always been looked at as one of the very, very important fundamentals for that. And it's not just me saying that because I have a wide palette of stuff. I like you guys. I like Foghat. I like Twisted Sister. I like a whole bunch of stuff. But if you look back historically, had it not been for you guys, something would have been missing out of the picture. Each little puzzle piece was extremely critically important. Even the Anvil was critically important to paint the picture. You guys, thank God, never quit doing what you did and did that for 6 years. I mean, I think you guys got out a little too soon, but thank God.
Because we all sort of ventured off into different things because management was just horrific for us. But yes, I agree with you. And the new Anvil album, I hung out with Rob a couple of weeks ago in Toronto, and I had the pleasure of hearing the new album, and it's just, Anvil fans are going to be blown away.
And I wasn't trying to be long-winded, but I wanted to paint the picture because you know what I'm saying. Cause you see that, especially looking back now, but to really understand what happened, you really have to.
In the beginning of that, and I understand what you're saying, but in the beginning of that, it was, we were the East Coast, the Northeast here, not a metal area traditionally.
Yeah.
And it's been kind of a hotbed where we were, because some great musicians have come out of here. I mean, Manowar, the Rods, Ronnie Dio came out of some great musicians who come out of here in this area who were metal people. But it was, at the time, like nobody wanted to know. We had to really fight to get close, play for nothing. Like I said, people left. It took a while to build it. I remember the first time we were playing in a place called Hornell, and it was one of the first strongholds we'd done. We'd actually been able to build up a following to the point where it was just jammed and people couldn't get into the club. And from day one, we were a concert act. We never tried to be a dance band. We were a concert act. And I was so thrilled, and I was doing the bookings, and I go to the club owner. They were so nice. They were great people. It was a family-run business. They had a bakery. They were wonderful people, and we'd always go to their house and hang out. And he said, I can't book you guys anymore. And I was shocked. And he said, I don't understand. We've never drawn better. I mean, people were outside. People couldn't get in. He goes, that's the problem. Nobody drinks. They stand there. Nobody can get to the bar. Nobody drinks. So it was the first time I was like, wow, look what's happening here. This is so great. And yet, here we are trying to play close. And, it was like, you felt like there was a no-win. But the Northeast was definitely not a metal place. It was never easy to play metal. And at the time, we had no clue that what we were doing was, anything special. It took the first album coming out and reading our review in Sounds before we actually knew that there was anything else like this going on. We weren't aware of anything on the West Coast. It was before, like when I produced Anthrax and started working with Overkill, and, I knew there was a changing of the guard at that point in terms of metal. But up until then, we weren't aware of it.
Yeah, and I hope you can please forgive me for being a little bit long-winded in that. It's just that to understand, you can't just say, well, Twisted Sister came out and there was Metallica. It's really a chronological thing.
Yes, that's right.
And to really understand, just like I'm going to throw one more, Jag Panzer from Colorado. Now, there's another area you would never think that a metal band would come out of. And, I mean, for like power metal, I mean, they're very, very important and part of the story, too. And it's those little things, That's why I wanted to paint the picture. So I apologize to anybody. Well, I apologize to you for being long-winded, and anybody that's listening is going to go, oh, doggone it, there he's going off at the mouth. I do that once in a blue moon. So anybody listening, I apologize, too, but it's just...
I thought it was a great little history lesson, because it is important to kind of know how it goes, and it does set the timeline for you.
And you guys, looking back on, like I said, when you look at some of the early women in metal that are still out here now, they're back. When you look at Angel, thank God that VH1 did that documentary to bring them back. When you look at a band like Raven, and you look at some of the different bands that are out there, they all ended up together making a big impact, but separately, it was those little pieces. You guys were a piece in the puzzle that did it just a little bit differently, like all the other bands that did it a little bit differently, but very, very important to the point that you guys, I think, are one of the fundamentals that took the hard rock, heavy metal element. You guys weren't just metal and you weren't just hard rock. You blended it. And I think that's an important part of the story, because we might not have had a Twisted Sister getting out on the thing. We might not have had some other things like a Crocus and that out there if you guys hadn't done it.
And, of course, the hard rock thing comes from the fact that, we were listening to Blue Cheer. David was on tour with Deep Purple. I mean, Roger Glover and Ian Pace produced the first Elf album. There were those influences for him. Those things show up. As a musician, you kind of breathe them in and, you exhale that stuff. So it was definitely, we were bringing those elements to it, but we were kind of playing it a little faster, a little harder sometimes, and bringing the metal edge to it. But we really just kind of did what we did, and we felt that we were isolated, even though later we knew. Like, Dee Snider came into our dressing room and played a show in New York at the Beacon Theater, opening for Twisted Sister. And after we had come back from England, and for our second album, it was the first time we met, and always in the interviews, constantly, do you know Twisted Sister? Because we were upstate New York, they were in New York City.
Right.
So, but people in Europe, you're from New York, well, we all live in the same town, we're going to the same clubs. Never met. So Dee Snider comes in, and I'm sitting down, and Dee comes in, and he's, a tall guy, and he's got his stage gear on, so he's even taller, and he looks down at me, and he goes, so what's this you've been saying in the magazines about Twisted Sister? I'm thinking to myself, okay, did I say something stupid? Because he's going to kill me if I did. Thinking, no, I never bad about these guys. I love Twisted Sister. And then he started laughing about how everybody's always asking them too, the rods. And so finally we got to meet, and everything was cool. But I mean, it was a pocket. So, it just turned out that that's what we were doing, and it was cool. And I'm glad we stuck to what we did. I'm glad all those bands. I mean, like you said, I think they're all important.
Yeah, and you guys are
like Dora, when you say like women in rock, like look at someone like Dora. I mean, she's just been phenomenal all these years.
Oh, I got a story. I'll tell you really quickly when we're done. I'll tell you about how that progressed. I know the story, and that basically via Chastain. I can tell you that. That's a whole other story for another time. But I can tell you exactly. I know exactly why Dora Pesh blew up so big. I'll tell you when we're done with this. But anyways, so to move forward on this, 86, you said that you guys, and I remember Dave said this too a little bit, you guys had just, everything was like management was trouble and this and that, and you had a lot of problems. You guys basically quit after that. And what did you do after you took off and went your own way from that, and you guys all kind of went your own ways? What did you do?
For me, I was producing bands. I started a recording studio production company. I started getting into some real estate. That's what what I got into. David had a restaurant. Gary has started a new career, and of course he played with Savoy Brown and whatever, toured for quite a few years as well.
And,
it was true about management. Management was horrific, and I think now when we're interviewed and always saying about how great the fans are, but when I say it, I can't be more sincere about the fans, because we were told by our management that nobody cared about the Rods. Our management we never saw things. We didn't know anything. We were always kept in the dark, and nobody cares about the Rods, and you guys basically suck. And we were really given the hard line, you guys are worthless, from management. So we had no faith in ourselves after a certain point. We were kind of beaten down. Our egos had been trounced, we were stepped on and kind of smushed into the ground, and we really, we just weren't sure. I mean, we just couldn't believe in ourselves anymore, because the one person who was out there telling us that that's what the industry was saying, and that's what everybody said. It took us the internet for fans to start finding us, and once they did, they were around the world, hardcore, loyal fans, and they show up at shows, and I can't say enough. That's why I love meeting fans whenever we go. I always want to spend time with the fans, because there are people there who've been with us from day one, and are still there. It's just it's the greatest, and I can't say enough thanks to them or appreciate them enough. And again, like you're saying about the backstory, when you put the backstory in, we spent so many years thinking nobody cared about us, to find out that actually there were people who really loved what we did. It's the greatest feeling. It's like this rebirth, and you just think, thank you, this is great.
That's a common theme with other acts too. I've spent a long time talking to somebody who, me and her, she's getting her career going back again after 20 years. Leather Leone from Chastain, and the first thing she told me was when I asked to interview, "But Mark, does anybody really care?" And I go, "Yeah." And it's, correct me if I'm wrong, the younger people who have had internet all the time, these were basically your sources back then for music. You had to go down, it's kind of like the Saxon song, Denim and Leather. You had to fight your way and trudge for tickets, and even if it was in the blizzard, you go down to the record store, hopefully you got lucky. You didn't even know half the time what some of these bands were. Like, it's the first time you've seen an Armored Saint album, you never heard of them, you're like, album cover looks cool. You had no idea, unless you're reading liner notes on other bands. Metal Shop was out on the radio once a week. Headbangers Ball was kind of going, but they didn't touch on everything. And if it wasn't in Rip or Metal Edge or Circus, in that it basically, unless you got a little college radio station or high school radio station, it wasn't out there.
Exactly. Yes, you had to really hunt for it, or you had to be really in the loop. So.
Yeah. So let's move fast forward. And by the way, let everybody know about because you apparently still have a management company. Let everybody know, because I saw the email unless I'm wrong in that. You want to tell everybody about that?
My management company, right now my focus is the Rods, but I still am producing. So I just have a new band that I produce from Miami called Blunted, or a progressive rock band.
Okay.
Young guys, and they, stuff is, I call it like Blunted the ride, because it's really cool. But I mean, you go from heavy music, and then suddenly 6 minutes later, you're in this little reggae section of the song. It's just crazy, the stuff they go through. But you hear the Latin influences as well, of all the metal that they're into. They live in Miami, and it's just, like I said, you kind of breathe in the music, and when you exhale, it's part of part of you, and that's what's happened. These guys are a really cool band. So, that's what I'm into, and I'm still looking for bands to produce as well.
And when we do the promotion part, promote that so people can get a hold of you too when they listen to this. But what was the idea to get the Rods back together after all these years? There's some stuff that dropped in there like 2007, 2008. You guys were playing again right in there, and an announcement was made eventually an album. You guys were looking at doing a new album, and kind of what was going on? What brought you guys back together?
Well, we never really broke up. We never disbanded. We just kind of ground to a halt. So, after all these years, it was suggested we do a couple of gigs, and so that's what we did. We wound up rehearsing. It was great, first rehearsal, and it was like we hadn't stopped. And my concern, I think, I'm speaking for myself, I'm sure it was this way for everybody, I didn't want to become the lounge version of the Rods. I didn't want to do that, I didn't want to come back, because sometimes bands reform, and I'm not putting anybody down because I admire anybody who just wants to hit the road. But sometimes the new material is watered down. Sometimes the band itself is a little bit tired, not bringing the same energy, not maybe putting that much into it. I didn't want that for us. We were a power trio. I just knew that if the energy wasn't going to be there, it was going to be a rough go, and I didn't want to be part of that. So I had questions, but the minute we started playing, it was like we'd never stopped. So from there, we did a couple gigs. Everything was cool. We started, David and I both write, so we were writing material. And just little by little, we do the gigs, we'll write some material and rehearse, and little by little, we started recording.
And how did it come about? Because I know from one of what you shared from your end about doing the last two songs with Ronnie, basically, because Electra's not really complete, but totally complete, but the last two complete songs by Ronnie James Dio, David wrote one for him called Metal Will Never Die, and you wrote one, like we were alluding to this, inserting with this in the beginning, it's very, very Dio-esque, but it's like Dio meets the Rods. It's literally Dio meets the Rods, which is what it is. And what was your experience? You're saying that, you heard he is always the one-take guy, always professional. When you finally met him, what was that like?
It was like, we had met years and years ago, but when I met him again, and he came to the studio, it was very relaxed. He was just what he is. I've always read this. I've read it, since he's died. So many people talking about Ronnie. You read about it, and it's the same. He was one of the sweetest guys, super intelligent, really great guy, a gentleman. That was who you were dealing with, very mellow, cool guy, and just came in. And did come in with a big rock star attitude. I was so thrilled that he was singing my song. And, to sing a song that I'd written was, like I said, it was a highlight of my career. But he was very respectful of the song. He would listen to my demo, and he would go, Carl, do you mind if I make a little change here? And please, Ronnie, whatever you want to do, make it your own, and just, whatever vision you have for it, go for it. And, but ever respectful, and of course, what was the point of that? Like, he's one of the greatest singers in metal. He's asking me if it's okay if he modifies a little melody that I'd written or change a little approach to something. It wasn't even a necessary question, but because of who he was as a person, he was polite, he was kind, he was respectful, and it was incredible. The whole session was amazing, and I think coming up with, it was decided that, when Ronnie said that he was going to, he'd been in Portland with David, and they talked about it, and he said, what, next time I'm up, I'll sing a couple songs. So, and I think, I guess David had gone to California after that, but anyway, it was set up that Ronnie was coming to town to sing the songs, and we were trying to figure out what songs. So David had written this riff, which was Metal Will Never Die, played it for me, and I was blown away. So we demoed it. And it was just one of those things where we set it up with the click track, he demoed it, he played the guitar, the bass on it, thought the tempo was really cool, and then it was like, let's throw a solo on here. The computer crashed at the end of the solo. But what you hear on the recording is that demo. That's the demo we did that day that we were inspired that's nice. I mean, they are great, but are they really that good? Like, is anybody really that good? But in fact, Ronnie was.
And let me ask you this, because I know it's getting a little bit late. There's two ways to do this, and I'm thinking maybe when we do the follow-up with you and David and maybe Garry, we can kind of go through the album track by track. So for right now, because I know David and I were talking about doing a follow-up for this, so how about sometime in May, so how about we pick out your favorite song, or at least right now your favorite song on the album. Overall, what the three of you really like on the album is what you would classify right now as your favorite song. The song that was the easiest to just create, it just came really quickly, and the one that was the most difficult and challenging.
Okay, I would say, and this is a tough one because there are a couple songs on this album that I really love.
We'll go ahead and mention both of them then.
Well, I think the songs for me that I've written, because I love David's stuff. I mean, David's a guy who, from the early days of Elf, when I saw him, he had Marshall stacks, played as loud as anybody could possibly play, and that's who he is. I mean, he's got the same guitar tone. I mean, the guy's just been a heavy guy, never owned an acoustic guitar. My joke is, he plays without plugging in, it's still too loud. People ask him to turn down. I love his music, so I love his songs, but in particular, I just want to rock. But the songs that are standouts for me, The Code and Madman. And The Code because, Ronnie sang on it. It was a vision I had. When you write a song, they don't always turn out the way you kind of hear them or want them to turn out in your head. But that song did, and my daughter sings those little ahs in the break, and so she's a singer. It was great to have her on the recording. I mean, here's my little baby who's now 21, but she's a really good singer, and it was great to have her part of it. The other song was Madman, which was a song that was, an idea, something that had been floating around in my head for a long time, and again, will this turn out the way I hear it? It's just such a bizarre song, unconventional tune, and can we pull it off? But in fact, we did. It's exactly as I imagined it would be and hoped that it would be. So those two are the songs for me that were standouts for me. As far as the easiest one was probably Ride Free or Die. I mean, that was one that just sort of came to me without, was the last song when David and I each had written two new songs. I Just Want to Rock was one he wrote, and Ride Free or Die was one that I wrote, and it just came to me. In fact, the lyrics, originally that song had been called Politician, and I kept struggling with the lyrics, and finally I'm like, this is a biker song. Why am I'm sitting there, like, trying to work on lyrics, and I just can't get this last verse, and this is not Politician, this is a biker song. So I went, you know what, I'm just going to just write it as a biker song, and within 10 minutes it was done, and the whole done arrangement, lyrics, the add-on in the song, the other chorus, it was like, a gift just came. So that was the easiest song to write. Once I changed it from being political to a biker tune, it just came out, which I guess is the way it is with the R.O.A.M. We all know that certain songs work for the R.O.A.M. better than others. So.
Yeah, what's kind of everybody's favorite song right now as you guys, all three of you are talking? What's the song you guys are all together as a band really enjoying?
That's a good question. I don't know that we ever talk about that.
Okay.
We're kind of funny guys that way. I mean, we all have that self-deprecating humor to begin with, and none of us ever go, we really are great at this. Nobody ever talks up anything or goes, oh, that was really great, or you're great, or this is, just not those kind of guys. So it's actually never come up, and that's an interesting question. We're rehearsing Wednesday, so I'm going to ask everybody what's their favorite song on the album now and take a consensus.
That'll work. And what was the most difficult or challenging song for you guys to write, or for you personally, for any of you guys to put together on the album? The one that maybe it was just a long time coming, maybe you guys had worked on this years ago, was left over from when you guys were together, were playing together back in the 80s, or it just kind of one of those things, for whatever reason, the note or this or that didn't sound right, and you guys wanted to pull your hair out, but you finally got it together and it finally worked?
I think Madman was that song.
Okay.
None of these songs are songs from the old days. These are all new songs. But Madman was a song that, you know, really was trying to get the sound. I mean, it was a tough, fine line between heavy and just the actual eerie, creepy thing that goes on in that song. I mean, that song, if you listen to it with the lights out, is a little scary. So that was the toughest one, I think, to get.
Now, I'm going to say this, too, if you'll permit me to say this just as we get ready to round this out. The early stuff up through about song 6 or song 7, which is Living Outside the Law and Let It Rip, has more of the traditional sound, and then starting about Fight the Fire or Mad Men, there's more of a newer sound for you guys. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I do. I mean, I've heard, this is not the first time I've heard that. Some of our friends who've heard the album have commented about those songs as well.
And it's not as a bad thing, it's a good thing. It shows that you guys are able to take something and produce something new that has kind of a today's sound, but it's still classic and traditional, and you can still tell it's the R.O.A.M. Did you guys realize that at first when you guys were doing this, or you guys were just writing and creating and there it came?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we all know, when David and I write, we both know what the R.O.A.M, because, you know, he has Bitten by the Beast. I'm working on a solo album.
Right.
You know, I'm 2/3 done with my album. All my material is written. But we don't bring the songs we write that aren't really R.O.A.M songs. We don't bring them in because we learn, you know, what works for the R.O.A.M. We know what the R.O.A.M are and what works for us as a band. So I think those songs we knew they would work. And as far as, you know, some of the songs are a little bit different. You know, sometimes David's a little more straight ahead. I'm more experimental, as you can tell from the code. You can tell from Live It Outside the Law is a different type of track for us. You know, that's a riff in a song that I wrote, a little bit different. So in Madman, of course, is totally crazy. So it was just, we kind of knew what the R.O.A.M were. And I think the fact that what you're saying is true. I think we didn't really, I don't think it was ever coded to make sure we don't stray too far from our roots. I think that's who we are as a band. You know what I mean? I don't think.
Can you say that last part over?
Sure. I don't think we strayed very far from our roots simply because that's who we are as a band. And I think that's what we do, that's what we write, and that's who we are. And it's just, I don't know that we could change it. We sit down and we play, that's kind of what comes out. So it really wasn't a conscious effort. I think some of the more modern things would be, you know, maybe some of my songs, because I listen to a lot of material, and as a producer, I'm always, you know, listening to sounds and ideas and, you know, different bands. So maybe that's coming out in some of my songs, but I think all of the stuff is just who we are as a band. I think it's the R.O.A.M, and I think if you like it, it's cool, and if you don't like it, then, you know, you're probably not going to, you don't like the first song, you're probably going to want to just move on from there.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw my review of this yet or not, but I Just Want to Rock is a song. I'm not going to make any comments on this other than this. This is a song that can cause you to lose your license and go to jail.
Yeah, I love that song. I love playing that song.
Yeah, if you don't watch it very quickly, just to be forewarned, you'll probably be way exceeding the speed limit before you realize it.
You see the lights in the rearview mirror, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's all over. So let's do this. By the way, real quick, do you have a working title for your solo album yet? Do you want to wait a little bit on that and do a follow-up on that when that's ready to go?
No, I mean, the working title for my album is Madman.
Okay.
So that's the working title for mine.
Are you going to use the song Madman on there too, or?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
That's why it's the working title, because I think that initially that was a song I was going to use, but eventually with the R.O.A.M just kicked it in the ass, so then I decided that, you know, my album will probably be something different.
But it's kind of, if you do use that title, it's kind of a good connection to the R.O.A.M too, so it's kind of a nice little tie-in too.
Yeah, it's also, you know, because it's an album it's musical. I mean, it's a heavy album, but it's got a lot of things, and I think some of the things are like, there are little drum interludes between songs, and there's some cool stuff in it, and it's definitely an album by a drummer with some really cool stuff on it. I'm really proud of it. So we'll see. You never know how people will take it, but I'm thrilled to be doing it, and I'll be glad when it's finished. It's an accomplishment for me.
Cool. And let's do this. Let's do all the social networking media stuff, starting with the website for the R.O.A.M and Facebook and Twitter and all that. And sometimes bands are still using MySpace, but it seems like not so much anymore. I've actually had a couple people say they just aren't really using it anymore. And then anything personal for you too, and go.
Okay, it's the therods.com is where basically everything can be found for us. I mean, Facebook, you can find me on Facebook. Actually, I think you can find each of us on Facebook separately, and the MySpace page is myspace.com/therods official site. And so that's pretty much it.
What about for you where you're looking for...
Niji, there's a Rods fan page, which I see a lot of people posting on that. So.
Yeah, that's what Ronnie Dio and Ronnie had started, Niji Entertainment.
That's right.
Yeah, and what about you personally for with management and that, and for working with bands? You said you're always looking for stuff. Is there anybody can find you out there?
They can just find me on Facebook.
Okay.
Message, just post.
Okay.
But yeah, any bands are interested, definitely contact me. I'm always listening to new material.
Okay, and I'm going to mention the name of the album again. It's called Vengeance, and it's coming out in May. And everybody can go to the website for more information on that, and Facebook for the updates and everything. I want to say thanks to Chips for PR for setting this up, first of all, and I really appreciate them for that. And I appreciate you doing this, and David always being there too. I appreciate you guys as well.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the support.
No, it's not a problem. I'm just a guy that loves music, that's all.
Yeah, very knowledgeable one.
Well, that's a big part of my life, and I read a lot. I actually had a musician, a real quick story, take a couple seconds. Had some friends that are musicians when I was living in Florida, and were like, my God, you're a walking encyclopedia on the subject. Not really, I just read a lot, listen a lot, that's all. So
it's great to be interviewed by somebody who has that much knowledge. I mean, it's not always the case, really, that there are holes in some people's background, but you really have the whole picture, so it's great.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. I want to say thank you for that. I don't know how to react to that, really, but, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to let you take us out of here when we're done, like I was saying earlier, just hanging the phone for a second, but I like to let everybody have the opportunity. I've had everything from, musicians who've said hi to their spouses and family, and I love you, to them, to a couple guys that got very, very ultra-prophetic and gave these very, very mythic, epic words of wisdom, which that's okay too, to generally a lot of times it's just we want to say thank you to the fans and this person and that person, so I'm going to let you take us out of here.
All right, well, for me, I want to say thanks to the fans. As I said earlier, the fans have stuck by us, and at the end of the day, that's why we do this music, and the fans are there. We get a lot of energy from them, and I love meeting fans at shows, so I'm never feel afraid to approach me because I love meeting everybody, and I appreciate everybody's support, so, all the best to the fans.
And I want to say thank you for everything, Carl, and I'm going to say interview over.